So as you may have guessed by now, and if you haven't, then I don't know what to say to you, we are in a new regulation period in the year of our Lord 2026. We have a new chassis, new aero, and more importantly, new engines. And for 3 races so far, we have seen how these new bits all work in the car. I'm sure you all know this by now though, so how has the racing been? Well, it has been, and depending on who you ask, will justify my answer on why the racing just has been. Truly, that's the best way to describe these regs, since you have one side of people saying racing is fixed and there are little to no imperfections with the regulations at all. However, you have another side of people who, despite the objectively entertaining racing, say it's artificial due to many factors in these cars, some of which are totally out of the driver's control. And thanks to Behrman's crash in Japan highlighting many fears many had about these regulations, again, the racing has been. And not to be a lame fence sitter or anything, but truthfully, my opinion is that both sides are right. The racing is objectively entertaining. Like, no one in good faith can tell me this isn't some good shit. Like, don't lie. However, I also understand and agree with the fact that some of the new factors, like the battery for example, should be in the driver's control, since with how it currently is, which is semi-automated, it could throw drivers off by overtaking when maybe they did not want to. However, something that I am adamant on is how this racing isn't artificial, or rather it is, but so was this, and this, and this, and literally every regulation period since the sport's birth in 1950. All artificial racing is are forced technical innovations in the cars that promote better racing. Are the battery 2026 cars artificial in the sense of it's a resource that could be deployed whenever and give an advantage to a car overtaking behind? Yes, but so was DRS, so was KERS, so were the tire wars, so were the teams with suspiciously good reliability. Like, this is nothing new, guys. Anyways, tangent aside, I wanted to look decade by decade at Formula 1 and see which regulation period gave us the best racing. Though, we run into a little problem, since what qualifies as good or best racing? Well, the scale I'll be using is, disclaimer, my opinion, but I won't be so biased. The basis of my opinion will be if driver skill is a necessity and not a bonus, if the cars were fun to drive according to the drivers, and the actual on-track overtakes. So let's whip out the good old tier list from F to S tier and get to burning bridges. Subscribe if you're new if opinions are all you have, and let's get to quacking now.
A good weather for a race, but especially for a dog.
Beginning chronologically, we have the 1950s period of F1, and if you have basic knowledge of this period in the sport, you would know regulations really weren't a thing. Innovation wasn't sought after, safety standards was woke nonsense, and shit, not even every F1 race was a championship round. I mean, Formula 1 has been racing for many years before 1950, it was just that year we finally saw a championship for it. So the cars they were running had minor changes throughout the decade, mainly adjusting engine cc power between naturally aspirated engines and charged engines. Along with this, there was no weight limit during these times, and fun fact, helmets were not used until 1952, which as many reports put it, was akin to wearing a dinner bowl on your head. Okay, so the regulations and standards were basically non-existent. How about the racing? Surely with there being nothing to the sport was the purest, and the racing was like the finest Coke in Miami, right? Well, looking past the many driver and spectator deaths, the racing, of course, was absolute dog shit. Of course, I never witnessed it. My dad was still in the ball bag of my teenage grandpa, for crying out loud. But looking at reports and the general consensus, the racing was fast and electric, but only when they survived. As for the actual racing and on-track passes, that was of no concern, since these things were hardly televised and it would be weird for watching it like that during that time. But let's say it was supposed to be watched for on-track passes. Well, there was still a lack of it thanks to super lopsided competition, courtesy of teams like Alfa Romeo and Ferrari. The sport was so uncompetitive because of this that, fun fact, the sport ran under F2 rules in 1952 and 53, so the fuel can be closer, which of course barely fixed the issue. I mean, what do you want me to say? Racing during this time was more of a hobby, so much so that fat, rich, old guys would be able to run in these races and actually be competitive somewhat. Sure, you had grids with people like Ascari, Sterling Moss, Mike Hawthorne, and of course, Fangio, but like 70% of the grid was just guys racing for fun and either never doing it again or more likely dying. Though as for the racing in this period, it gets an F tier, but at least you saw the first greats being born. Now for something actually worth talking about the 1960s. The 60s started with the same regs from the year prior. However, for 1961 to 1965, the regs started to change up massively. For starters, the engines now had to be naturally aspirated, so no more super or turbochargers for now. A weight limit finally was introduced at 450 kg or roughly 1,000 pounds. The cars had to be open wheel now thanks to Mercedes, along with a plethora of other changes. Also, helmets became mandated during this time, which, hey man, at least they kind of care about safety now. So with all of these changes, driver skill became a necessity now, and slowly but surely, rich guys would stop driving in the sport as F1 became an actual championship for true now. During this time, legendary drivers like John Surtees, the only driver to this day to have won championships on 2 and 4 wheels, Graham Hill, the only driver to this day to have won the Triple Crown, Jack Brabham, who is still somehow the most successful Australian driver, and F1's forgotten GOAT Jim Clark sprouted up and won titles, and the sport was truly getting defined now. From 1966 to 1969, the regs would change once again with the reintroduction of compressors and engines, minimum weight increased by about 50 kgs, a cockpit being required in the car, which again, how was it taking this long? But even worse in my opinion, a reverse gear was finally mandated. Thank God I was born in the safety era. Also in 1968, Lotus developed the first car with wings, which of course are very present today. These were all minor to big changes that did aid the racing. Oh yeah, actually, how was the racing during this time? With even more legendary drivers like Jackie Stewart and Bruce McLaren racing now, I bet the racing is so peak. Well, looking past the many driver and spectator deaths, the racing was dog shit. Not absolute dog shit though. Racing was at least possible now, but lopsided competition was still a slight issue at times, and considering how if you even dared make contact with the other car, you could lose your life. Racing was fast, but still very dangerous and cautious. Though while the cars became faster and the birth of the look of the sport happened during this time, racing was still a very dangerous thing, which of course hurt the entertainment aspect of the sport. I would give this period a low C tier, but it is interchangeable with the high D. Let me know which one fits better. Now for the 70s, and with the cars getting even faster, surely safety is a real concern now, since it shouldn't be hard to understand that the faster you go, the safer you should be. Starting in 1970, and I'm gonna keep it a buck with you guys, every single year during this decade saw some change to the regulations. A lot of them were down to safety, but there are a few major and minor changes to the car, so I'm just gonna list them now as one big change across the whole decade. Fuel tanks were now constructed to be more safer, crushable structures became mandatory, overhead airboxes were banned, and engine cooling became limited. I'm sure that won't be an issue. The front roll bar became defined, central fuel tanks pioneered by Lotus became mandatory to prevent fires, and best of all, wing mirrors became mandatory. Of course, more technical innovations also sprouted up in this decade, such as the ground effects, also by Lotus, W foreshadowing, so a lot of changes basically. In 1970, the average F1 car looked like this, and by 1979, they look like this. A lot of changes, and it reflected in the racing, since now we are talking. The racing actually became something worth watching, since with the cars having more, the drivers have more to do, which puts them on edge and delivers us some yummy battles. Of course, this decade is remembered fondly for 1976 with the legendary title duel between Niki Lauda and James Hunt, but other legendary drivers like Emerson Fittipaldi, Mario Andretti, and Jochen Rindt, the only posthumous world champions, sprouted up. And yes, despite all the changes to the cars and safety, death was still all too common in the sport. However, the 80s would largely fix that, so the entire decade can be defined by change and on-edge racing that, while still lopsided at times, started to become way more equal. I'd say the 70s get a solid B tier from me. The 80s. The music was at the synthiest, the coke was at its purest, and the sport of F1 was at its worst. No, I am not exaggerating. 1981 saw FOM, or Formula One management, get birthed, spearheaded by Max Mosley and the legendary Bernie Ecclestone. Along with this, downforce was reduced to slow the cars down, but thanks to ground effects, I really doubt it did anything. Also, engines became more streamlined during this time, which put nearly the entire grid on the same engine design. 1983 saw ground effects banned entirely, along with four-wheel drive and cars with more than 4 wheels. In 1984, refueling became banned for the first time in the sport, and the maximum fuel capacity was increased to try and reduce the power from turbocharged engines. What is this, 1984? In 1986, naturally aspirated engines became banned before again being legal in 1987, and then turbocharged engines became banned in 1989, with naturally aspirated being the only way forwards now. You know, it gives me comfort knowing that even in the 80s, FOM and the FI still don't know what the fuck they are doing. Along with these car changes came many safety standards being introduced, such as the crash test and medical helicopters being necessary at all tracks, and with all of these changes, again, came the worst period in F1. This is entirely subjective though, since others would say it was one of, if not the best period of F1. I mean, we had engines going upwards to 1,000 to 1,200 horsepower, all with no battery, and remember engine cooling being limited now? Yeah, this is why this period sucks. Reliability was non-existent. Sure, maybe drivers weren't dying as much, which is a great thing, but something in the car was still going to die, and this, ironically, killed a lot of racing. Look at the 1981 season, compared to 1984, compared to 1987. Notice how DNF is the most common result? This just isn't good, man, and with the cars now being super fast, along with iconic drivers like Prost and Senna racing, the reliability just cannot be this horrible. So despite the racing being mighty, even between the lopsided teams, it rarely happened, and because of it being due to reliability, I have to give this period a D tier, unfortunately. The 1990s thankfully made it a priority to fix reliability as much as possible, and this era also saw many more innovations. Adrian Newey started to become a household name thanks to his designs on the Williams car, with the most notable being the 1992 Williams car with its active suspension, traction control, launch control, ABS, and like a billion other things. The cars also start to look modern now, with the iconic sounds and look of the sport dating to this period. So surely it was good. In 1990, wing mirrors became larger and quick-release steering wheels became mandated. In 1991, the wings got a size adjustment along with the tires in 1993. In 94, thanks to Newey's electronics and the unfortunate death of Ayrton Senna, electronics became banned from the sport in an attempt to put more driver skill in the cars. Refueling got reintroduced, pit lane speed limits became mandatory, wings got adjusted again, same with the tires. You can make a whole novel on the changes of 1994. In 1995, engines became slower, along with a bunch of new chassis stuff in an attempt to make the cars even safer at the cost of performance. 1996 refined these rules before getting overhauled again in 1998 with the introduction of grooved tires to again slow the cars down, along with many minor adjustments as well. So with the sport becoming much slower in favor of safety, I bet this woke nonsense killed my racing and made F1 unwatchable. How you are wrong. Despite dominant teams like Williams and McLaren here and there, competition was ripe, since with cars slower, that just means more opportunity to overtake, and the drivers ain't dying as much anymore. Hell yeah. Many iconic F1 moments came from this period, and equally iconic drivers started racing here, such as Mika Hakkinen, Damon Hill, and of course, Michael Schumacher. This era to me was a true golden era of F1, and it's a shame I was still in my dad's ballsack. I give this era an S tier. 2000 was the start of the new millennium. Everything was cool and radical and numbered in the thousands because it's so edgy. This reflected on F1 because, Christ's sakes man, look at this car. In 2000, V10s became the mandated engine on every car, putting them all at 3000cc and similar performance, but it's F1, it ain't similar. The following year saw traction control re-allowed, since F1 admitted the ban did nothing anyways. Before 2003 saw the introduction of the hands device to further driver safety. 2005 saw a lot of chassis inner workings refined to allow for better racing, such as size changes and more or less restrictions depending on the part, before 2006 saw V8s become mandatory for the same reason of better racing. 2007 saw the end of the tire wars, with only one tire manufacturer being permitted, along with traction control finally being banned in 2008. Then of course 2009 saw a giant reg overhaul with the goal of creating better racing and less dirty air thanks to these downforce monsters. 2009 also saw KERS introduced, the first electronic battery powered thingy whatever. So the sport during this time tried to speed things up a bit from the 90s, and what resulted of that was the most beautiful era of F1 objectively, but also some pretty mid racing. When it was good, it was some good shit, but it wasn't consistent, and what didn't help this fact was for most of the decade, Ferrari was just on top. It was like 1950 with the lopsided competition and dull racing, but at least the cars and spectacle was pure eye candy. Iconic drivers got their start during this period, such as Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen, and the one and only Lewis Hamilton. Again, I understand why people think this is the best period ever in F1, because surely the spectacle has not been the same. At the same time, their racing was just not on, since there was minimal overtakes, and even when Michael retired, nothing really changed. Also, 2009 the world ended, so I don't know what to say. I'd give this era a low B tier, with the cars being fun to drive heavily carrying this result. The regs from 2009 would largely stay the same until 2013, with a few minor tweaks here and there, with the technical innovations being banned immediately after they were introduced. Off of the back of the 2010 season closer, DRS was introduced in 2011 to promote better racing, so the cars can stop being put in a chokehold by dirty air so much. Despite that though, these cars were very good for racing since we saw decent overtakes and great title battles. However, technology is shifting, folks. It is 2014 now, and hybrid car technology is starting to become a thing, and F1, after conquering common driver deaths, now sets its eyes on conquering the threat of climate change. In 2014, the sport introduced hybrid engines that were V6 turbocharged and had cars evolve into a whole battery system. Front wings also got modified to look like dildos on half the cars, and thankfully by 2015, they had it figured out. Then in 2017, the regs changed again to speed up the sport with these ginormous downforce demons. Everything changed apart from the engines, and what came of it is probably the second most debated reg period. These cars were fast and beautiful. Every corner was becoming flat out basically, but with all of this downforce, dirty air became such a serious issue that racing kind of became dead again. Refinements were made in 2018 with the introduction of the Halo courtesy of Jules Bianchi's death, and 2019 saw the many aero bits shaved off. So what do I think of the racing? Well, there was driver skill, sure, and the cars did look nice, but the racing product was just too inconsistent. When it worked, it was peak. When it didn't, it stunk. And yeah, I'll give this era a B tier since one half of the decade was great and the other was just too inconsistent to say anything definitively. And finally, the 2020s. 2021 saw some of the intricate floor bits shaved off to promote better racing, while also introducing the budget cap to stop the top teams from spending so much money making monster cars. These changes proved very effective immediately, since we got a lovely title fight between Lewis and Max that to this day surprises me just how civil both fan bases acted. The following year in 2022 saw another complete overhaul change back to the ground effects for the first time since the 80s. This was done for, you guessed it, better racing and to slow the cars down. This one is tricky since they did work at first. The cars followed each other really good and we got some good racing even if DRS is still very much prevalent. However, an issue arose in that quite literally the drivers are getting bounced to death. Porpoising in the car started to happen and this was harming the drivers back, but luckily most teams fixed this issue somewhat, and even if the car still bounced, it was fine now. However, only most teams, not all of them, since Mercedes just couldn't fix it, prompting a mid-season reg change in 2022, raising the ride height of all the cars, along with more minor fixes in 2023 and 24 that eliminated porpoising by, well, essentially making the ground effects void. The teams could run the car super low and use the ground effects, but risk plank wear and a DSQ, or ride the car high and not gain any performance whatsoever. This obviously led to some terrible racing since all the cars literally didn't work as intended anymore and give us some great napping material. All of this has led to the 2026 regulations needing some new chassis and aero, plus a brand new sustainable engine that has 50-50 power split between energy and combustion ran on a sustainable fuel. And 3 rounds into these new cars, the racing is objectively better, like we are seeing on-track action now, but the engine technology is also objectively too premature to be used 100% because of the 50-50 energy split. Battery runs out too quick and charges too slow, leading to excessive clipping, which is an eyesore. And also, the closing speeds between a full battery power and low battery power car is way too high, leading to some very dangerous crashes. A mid-season rule change is already slated to debut at round 4 in Miami, and I expect many future ones for 2027 and maybe 2028. So overall, yeah, what a shit decade so far. Peaked so unbelievably high in 2021 and the first rounds of 2022, but then fell off such a steep cliff that we need a new form of measurement for it. 2026 is promising since the racing is better, but there are undeniable issues that are affecting the racing in such a horrible way. You really have to think to yourself, who approved this? Giving this decade a tier is obviously tough since it's not complete, but from the first 6 years, I'd say a C tier is in order, and there's your dang tier list. So those are my thoughts on each reg period. God, my head hurts. I'll say though, it is very cool to see how this sport has evolved from the first race to the most recent one. Innovation is everywhere, and once we perfect these hybrid energy cars, what's next? The new E concept, hydrogen engines, flying cars? I don't know, but let's see what happens. Anyways, I want to give a quick shout out to all my result flock for the continued support, and make sure to join if you want cool benefits as well as just helping me out. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe since it really helps me out. Make sure to let me know in the comments what your ranking is, and as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for the duck.